Alright, this was another crazy little 3-minute game. You know, basic queen pawn opening. He's one of those guys that learned this from one of those computers. I don't know where they get this idea. Nobody teaches this. And they really don't teach bishop to d7. That was a real mystery. I've never seen that move played. So, you know, continue its straightforward development. This will prevent bishop from g4 if he's thinking about it. Bishop to d7 was really bad because if you play bishop to d7, you need to play knight to c6. You don't play bishop to d7 and c6. You can play one or the other, but not both. And now you see why his knight is sitting there going, oh God, my two best squares are gone. They're occupied by somebody else. What a freak. So I guess it moves his bishop out of the way, whatever. And okay, I'll just do this, no problems. So just do it safe and castle. Yeah, it was really bizarre. I don't know what he was thinking. He's going to do all this business and then take my knight. Okay. The rook isn't the greatest. Isn't particularly posted well on e2, but he's still there. That knight is gone. So that's a head scratcher as far as I'm concerned. He got something out of it in his mind. I don't know what it was, but the rook theoretically would go down to the f3 and then g3. But e2, no good. Open the diagonal for the queen at the very least. So just see what's going on. Bishop to b4 was looking potentially interesting as well. And I played it. Because he wants to play e6. And if he plays e6, I'm going to shove that, you know, down there and take his bishop. So he didn't do it. I was like, okay, well, hey, knight forward. Open up my rook if he takes my knight, because I'll capture with the f pawn. It's fairly standard. When you have the d and f pawn there, usually you'll capture with the f pawn if they take it. He did, and so did I. Because, well, now this time I've recaptured with a threat on his pawn. He played this very oddly. Rook to d7. Because he's setting up what he thinks is a big trap. I'm like, okay. I see your trap. It's not really a trap, but okay. See, he thinks he was being clever. And there's a difference between being clever and being smart. Smart is forever. Clever is temporary. That's the difference. So a lot of people confuse clever with being smart. Clever is a lower level of smart, and it's a very temporary, short term. So he's clever. Ha ha, I'm going to play e6. Ha ha, I'm not winning the pawn necessarily for the pawn itself. I'm getting my rook activity. So I've won activity for my rook. That's what I have won. So that's not a common result of winning something in chess. In a combination or whatever is winning activity. But in this case, I won activity. That rook was buried on e2. And now look, in a handful of moves, booyah, I got a file. So White's feeling pretty good because he recognizes that you won activity, not a pawn. Hey, look, haha, I'm attacking both of your... I'm like, really, dude? That's fantastic. You get a cookie. A classic line from far before your time. Anyway, that was from Kelly's Heroes, the best war movie ever made. So check that out if you're interested and want to see a good, fun movie. So, do you want to take my rook now? Yeah, I didn't think so. So he takes the bishop, as he should. Oh, actually he didn't. He should have taken the bishop. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Again, he's clever. He's setting up a clever trap because he's clever and I'm smart. Do you see the trap that he's set for white? If you don't see it, pause the video and we'll be right back. And we're back. Okay. The trap is rook to f6. Because bishop takes and then whoops, you lose a rook. Well, you think I'm stupid? I assure you, I'm not stupid. So, just retreat out of the problem and there you go. Now, technically, if you want to get down to it, I could have done bishop. It's like, yeah, I don't care. I want to kill his bishop. You know, I could have played. No, that was the right move. Yeah, rook f2 is the right move. I was thinking of something different. Gee, should I take his bishop? Oh, I guess I should. Look how he out-clevered himself. Hey, genius, what happened? You lost a pawn. So he did all these clever maneuvers. What did he do? He lost a pawn. My dad always said, don't try to be too cute. And he was too cute, exactly as my father would say. Don't try to be too cute. Do your business and play the good moves and don't try to get cute. He got cute, he lost a pawn, and his position really isn't very good to begin. You know, it's an inferior position and a pawn down. Other than that, he's fine. Yeah, well, whatever, dude. You want to take it? I will take it gladly. He did, and so did I. He played some odd moves. Like queen to d7. I'm like, what do you think? I'm going to take you? I'm not stupid. Haven't you figured that out yet? The answer is, I guess not. Because he did two cute moves that both failed to, you know, claim a victim. And he ended up being just a pawn down with no control on the only open file in the game. That's what being cute got him. So, always remember, there's a difference between being clever and being smart. Be smart. Learn how to be smart. That's what we're doing in these videos. I'm helping you to be smarter as a chess player. Clever is cool if it works, but, you know, it's ephemeral. It's here today, gone, you know, in 2 seconds or 10 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it is. I'm smart. I don't try to be clever, because smart is forever. That's why I won and he lost. I'm smart and he's clever. There's nothing wrong with admitting that he's clever. But smart beats clever. And you're just watching it happen right in front of your face. Another bad move. Why would you trade the queen? I mean, I'm going to take that pawn. And I'm threatening, really. There's two things I was threatening, though. I was threatening. Let's go back. This is what the threat was. If he does something, let's just make a dummy move that doesn't count. Just so I can show you what I'm threatening. The computer won't allow it anyway. I'm threatening to check him. He goes here. And then I go here. That's what I'm threatening. So he can't allow that to happen. So he'd go back. And then I'd take. And he'd take, you know, you'd have to take with, well, it doesn't matter. You should take with the rook, but not 100% bad. Fork. This is what the threat, the ultimate threat is this. And that this king and pawn endgame is a stone cold win for white. The 2 versus 1 on the right side will force a passed pawn. It will be the distant passed pawn. The black king will Pac-Man the rest of these black pawns. Easy win. Okay, very easy win for someone who studied king and pawn endgames. So, if you haven't studied king and pawn endgames, it is not as easy, but it's still not too difficult. So anyway, okay, now we go back to what we did. Okay, he goes here. Yeah, I come over there. He takes. I'm like, please, this is it. This is the study that you're going to need to see, and you're going to get it. All right. White is going to win this quite simply. King's going to move forward, threatening the H-pawn. I don't really have to go there. But the threat of me going there is just devastating. Wrong move. If you want to do it, I don't know. E5 might have been a slightly better one, but I could just play C3. Doesn't really matter. But E5 would have been better because it would have stopped me from playing King to F4. It doesn't matter. He's still going to lose. This is the correct move if allowed. If not, I'll play a different move to win. It doesn't matter. If he played E5, I'm just going to go over there, play G4, G5, and shove that pawn over there and make a passer, and then come forward and kick his butt. There's nothing he could do. So either way, it doesn't matter. Takes. Now he cannot push E5. It makes the win much easier. B6. You know, he's pretty much admitted he has nothing. G4. So when this, I'll run through this to give you a general idea. This is not rocket science. 2 versus 1. We make a pass pawn. Once we have a pass pawn, his king will be tied to the defense of that pawn to prevent it from queening, which he can do, no problem. But we'll sacrifice that pawn to give our king a head start on Pac-Manning the rest of his guys. Clearly, all of you guys know who Pac-Man is, and we're going to eat Pac-Man pellets. We call them pawns. So he resigned in this position. So G5. There's nothing he could do. Something to do, doesn't matter. You know, we can do multiple things. A3 would be a good move. C3 would be a good move. He's not threatening anything. This just kills all counterplay. He can't do anything. He moves, we take it. Everything he does now loses. It just doesn't matter. Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen and any, you got to get all the grandmasters in the world. There's nothing they could do. You know, it doesn't matter. It's like you can get all the NASA physicists you want, but you cannot change the laws of physics. I cannot change the laws of physics, Captain. You can't. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, the normal, the crushing moves are king to E5. Just owning this. But it doesn't matter. The win process, I told you, is to take the 2 versus 1, make a pass pawn, and then you play waka, 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 waka. There's nothing he could do. We're going to be kind about it. Hey, look at me. I have a shot. It's like, you're screwed, dude. If he doesn't take, if he goes forward and passes, that's a protected pass pawn that, you know, is ultimately devastating. Can't do that. And if he takes it, I'll win a pawn. Yes, I'm awesome. And waka, 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 waka. There's nothing he could do. Waka, waka, waka. All we need is one pawn and it's over. He comes here. Waka, waka, waka. He comes here. Waka, uh-oh, I'm going to get a queen. So you see, it's fairly basic stuff. But you have to have done the previous study and work at the fundamental level to look at the position. Here we go. When I traded queens with him. When I traded queens with him and moved to F2. Or, sorry, I traded rooks. So he moved, you know, traded queens. He put the rook there. The only way to defend his rook, his pawn, there's nothing he could do. That's the correct move, but his position is already lost. To be honest, the wrong one. Okay. To be honest, he has a slightly better chance if his king was on the other side. If his king was on b6. If his king was on b6, he'd have a... Oh, no, he'd just be dead. A rook and pawn endgame with two connected passers on the far side of the board is a win. It's a little more difficult than the king and pawn ending, but it's a relatively easy win. It's just it's going to be the same thing. You're going to push the pawns to paralyze the rook and or the king, exchanging whatever. We're always keeping in our back pocket the king and pawn endgame. What happens when you get in a clear endgame, and this one was fairly clear with the position being very decisive in favor of white with only one pawn, but the activity, everything is good for white. Black has no counter chances. So when you get to a clear endgame position where it's fairly obvious what you need to do and you're a pawn up, the problem with the defensive side is that the side that's winning always has in the back pocket the threat that he will trade off the remaining piece, either if it's bishops or knights or bishop versus knight, or if he's winning in an exchange up position, trading off the rook for the minor piece. He keeps the advantage side keeps the option of transferring transforming the resulting king and pawn ending into a winning position. Because in a king and pawn ending, it's probably like 99.99% that if you're a pawn up, you win. There are, I'm sure, there are some handful of counter examples. But no, I'm not talking about constructed problems, which are special cases. We're not talking about a special case. We're talking about actual tournament games. So in tournament games, if you're a pawn up in the king and pawn ending, you're winning at an almost 100% rate once you have the basic skills. And the king and pawn endgame skills are not that difficult. Just a matter of, going after the basic stuff and getting it done. So that's the sword of Damocles, is that you'll transfer this ending like this one was. That's a rook and pawn ending. And I had the sword of Damocles. You can't trade rooks with me or you just are dead lost. What did he do? He traded rooks with me and he was dead lost. And so this is really not difficult to get the skill. Of all the chess skills to acquire, becoming a decisive king and pawn endgame player is one that takes the least amount of time if you have the right materials to look at. That's the key. Because when you have these, you have to look at the different fundamentals of like where's the advantage that you have. There's a lot of things that we have to look at, but you have to be able to look at this and go, okay, we have two pawn islands. One giant pawn island, which is 5 on each side. The other one is 2 versus 1. So we want to look and see when this is a 2 versus 1. This is a 2 versus 1 king and pawn endgame on the king side. And on the queen side in the center, it's 5 on 5. So this is what I call the rule. I don't call this. This is the rule that is known as the rule of the distant passed pawn. So if we go back and let's just reduce this to its most basic version. He would move here, for example. It doesn't matter. Oops, sorry. There's a slight thing we have to do. Got to get this king forward. Your king has to be within range of the pawns, and you have to be able to calculate that you can defend your pawn. This is the distant passed pawn. Okay, he'd go here, I'd go here. It doesn't matter. I can go here or here, I don't care. It doesn't matter. This is the distant passed pawn. The king, the black king, is forever tied to this pawn. he can literally do nothing that, you know, goes outside of the square of this pawn, which is these squares here. D8 to G8 to G5 to D5. He can never leave that square, and it also extends out here, but there's two files over here that don't exist. It doesn't matter. So he can stay anywhere from, you know, the H all the way to the D files. This is the square of the pawn. The square makes a 4 by 4, okay? And also it extends over here, but they only see two of them. There's these two this half of the square. Anyway, so he has to stay in the square. Doesn't matter. So, what does black do? Well, he makes a move. What does white do? Now, literally, in a tournament, I've done this before, and you have to do this in a tournament. You literally do the counting. How many moves do you have? You know, do you play A4 or A3? We're going to literally run him out of moves. Now, we have the option he doesn't have. Black can never go to H5, which is a sort of a pass move. Okay, if he goes to H5, we're going to go to E5, chop this, and it's Pac-Man. Okay, and that's the problem he runs into, is that whenever he runs out of pawn moves, his king has to move. And when his king moves, E5 is mine. Okay, so this one's a really low end. This isn't very difficult. There's not going to be a lot of complicated calculating, because all we want to do is just force a weakness. Right now, if we could ever get this C pawn to move, then it's chop, 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 chop. Every time we move, it's a chop. So, and then you run into this stuff here where you move forward here and go, oh. But you got to be a little careful. There are some breakthroughs that you have to learn. We have to show you the breakthroughs, and I'll do that in a different video. But anyway, the general point is this. We want to get to this point. He takes, fine, we got him. Okay, this will stop the breakthrough. He can't do anything. It doesn't matter. So, he comes here, we take, he'd take. We've now locked him. He can't move. He can play E5, but I'll just take it. Which is cool, because he's going to take my pawn. If he just moves to H5, which is his only other choice to keep contact with this pawn, then I go here anyway. So, this is probably the right move. H5, I go here. He takes my pawn. I take his pawn. It doesn't matter. He's just screwed. And even if he was here, I'd just go to D5. And he's dead. It doesn't matter whether this pawn is the one that wins or the other one. I'm going to win. It doesn't matter. So I'm just showing you. I could just cash this E pawn, which I would in a tournament. I'll just take this one. It doesn't matter. The Pac-Man, you know, I've Pac-Man this guy. He's dust. There's nothing he can do. Aha, I'm with you. Oh, hell. You know, that's it. He's got nothing now. Now he's got to go backwards. Well, I didn't go backwards, but, you know, whatever. So, you get the general drift. This is easy stuff. But you have to put in the work on the fundamentals. So, that's in the future. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this game. You guys know what to do. Talk to you later.